All right. So, hi, my name is Jessica Couch. I'm a fashion and technology expert, and I go to conferences and do research so that you don't have to. One of the things that we have to talk about is what's going on with Saks. Now, what I'm not going to do is go into detail about the merger that failed or the fact that private equity ruins everything, including fashion, because there's other people who have went into detail about these things and done so in such a great way that we all know the issue is that Saks was failing. It got bought out by an individual whose main purpose was to get a high paying real estate deal done, for which he succeeded. But at the cost, of course, of an entire industry, at the cost of jobs, at the cost of the leisure of shopping for luxury in the United States, and then so many other issues that I think we have to cover. Because why do we keep allowing people who are not from the fashion or retail space to have this much say, credibility, and power in an industry right now that is not only in flux, but it absolutely needs the people that care about it the most to lead it? You may not have seen, but I did an article about when Nike hired the CEO who was not from the retail industry, doesn't understand fashion and all of the different nuances of it, and basically almost ran Nike into the ground. Now, in that particular article, I make the same case. Why are we looking for people not in our industry who do not have the experience, the ties, or the understanding to come in and then to create solutions for us? Now, this is a big problem, and I'm not sure why it's happening. What we don't see that I'm wondering is you don't see tech bros hiring stylists to come in and give their opinion about how designs are. And when they do, it's rare. But there seems to be an assumption that the fashion industry doesn't require you to be highly intelligent and it doesn't require smart people. And then there's another assumption that you can just bring in people who are from tech backgrounds or real estate tycoons or people who really understand numbers and the balance sheet, and they can speak a certain way and they're going to do magic numbers and somehow create a better experience. But see, the difference is with fashion and shopping in general, this isn't just about how much you can cheapen the experience in order to give one side a greater payout while the other side is completely drained and then ends up non-existent. The first thing we have to realize is that clothing is a commodity that people are going to need forever. There's never going to be a time where we do not need to be clothes. It doesn't make sense for anyone to come into this industry and try to drain it of all of its resources, continuously cheapen the final product, and think that there won't be consequences. Now, as an industry, we have enough problems as is, so the thought that this is happening was allowed to happen, and now we see the results without really understanding the actual consequences. And the consequences are dire, not just for shoppers who knew years ago that Saks was giving us a terrible experience, horrible products, and nothing was changing, but also for the people who needed those jobs and who utilized those careers to work their way up into the industry and make it better. Now, I'm a big fan of not hiring outside of the industry. I think that people who have worked on the sales floor in retail should have the opportunity to create viable careers and keep going up in their businesses because they carry vital pieces of information. Now, what information might be more vital than, say, being able to work magic on a spreadsheet to see how much we can skim off the top? Well, believe it or not, it's the relationship that is built with customers. We're in the age where AI can replace a lot of things. AI could replace a CFO. AI could replace your board of advisors. AI could absolutely replace these decision makers that are high paid, come from very prestigious universities, and continue to make mistakes in our industry because they don't understand key things. Number one, why would you trust someone who wears a vest year round and who only looks at numbers to understand an industry that is based on consumer feedback, consumer centricity, style, and other nuances that often aren't explained during a 2-year degree? Now, I don't have the answer to this. All I know is that I keep seeing it happen over and over. So maybe we need to have a conversation about fashion and why it's not an industry that private equity or anything like that can really succeed in. Now, it may not be obvious to you now, but the goal of private equity is not to help the industry that it is coming into. It's actually to drain it and to make it worse. We've seen this in healthcare extensively, where private equity buys up certain types of healthcare companies, and the result is years of worsening experiences, higher death rates, and all sorts of things that really doesn't get talked about because people are so fascinated with high-level jargon and this numbers game that people like to play. But when it comes to something like the fashion industry, this has two different types of motivations. There's utilitarian motivations and then there's hedonic motivations. Now, utilitarian motivations might be most familiar to people who are strictly numbers people, and maybe every so often they just go and buy as many vests, as many slacks in the same color as their peers so that they can just have something that they put on their backs when they go to work. For the rest of the world, the shopping experience has hedonic motivations in it that aren't simply explained on a spreadsheet. As a result, you have several different types of shoppers. You have shoppers that are motivated by style. And those are shoppers that understand certain style nuances. Maybe they're stylish themselves and they invest a lot of time creating uniqueness within their wardrobe and then portraying that uniqueness to the world. You see, clothing is what people come in contact with initially when they see you. Most people are going to judge you by your watch. They'll judge you by your shoes, different depending on your industry. They may judge you by your hairstyle, but your entire look is how you first show up and present. This is so important that there's actual guides in industries like banking on what to wear and what not to wear. So when people first come into that industry and want to be taken seriously, they absolutely know that they have to go high end, they need to go to certain stores, and they have to wear certain things. So then the thought that clothing doesn't matter enough to really understand the needs of the consumer and keep it quality is quite fascinating to me. So then we have shoppers that are motivated by price, which is a lot of Americans right now. Because if we're not paying attention, the American dollar has been losing a lot of value, and it makes shopping a little more difficult for the average person. So I know we hear a lot of things about, well, luxury shopping hasn't changed and, luxury is going up and that's great. But believe it or not, there's a lot more to shopping than just luxury. What Saks most likely got wrong is that, yes, people who can't afford luxury are going to continue to spend on luxury products. That is a given, and we understand that. But the next part is something we have to pay attention to. The people who are aspirational luxury shoppers are the ones who keep these retailers alive. You see, people who can afford luxury can go all over the world to spend luxury. When it was more convenient to come to the United States and shop as a part of what people do when they come to the US as a part of tourism, then we saw a boom in the luxury industry here. We saw so many stats talking about how luxury is booming and all of these different things. But you see, that customer easily can fly to anywhere else where there's better sales tax, politics, perhaps there's better experiences, and they can spend their money elsewhere. Now let's take Chinese consumers, for example. We relied heavily on Chinese tourists coming to America to shop because it was a novel thing at one point, and we saw a lot of luxury spending during this time where Chinese consumers would come to the US, buy luxury products, and leave. But when it no longer became convenient or affordable for Chinese consumers to buy with the US, they simply moved on. So what happens to the luxury here in America? Well, you see, there's a group of aspirational shoppers that I guess we tend to forget about. Middle American shoppers, people who work hard, have nice jobs, but see, they are spending to be a part of a certain group and to feel accepted and to feel recognized. Remember, we just talked about how important it is to wear certain things in certain industries so that people can recognize you. Well, there's a whole group of people that come out of school that may have established themselves that are shopping luxury in an aspirational way. However, these people are here, right here in the US, and they are wanting better experiences. So what happens when that person goes into Saks, meets with a disgruntled employee, and perhaps that employee is just upset because maybe they feel like they can't make a living off the wages anymore because their pays haven't shifted with the times? We don't know. You go into Saks, it's a dingy experience. You have items that are from seasons ago. You're not seeing the new brands that you saw on Instagram or in other places. You're mainly doing your discovery in resale, but maybe you wanted to come in the store and see what is modern and what is available. And when you don't see it, you're leaving. And I think we often forget about this customer experience of not delivering what customers want. See, unlike other industries where you can keep cheapening it and mixing ingredients and doing things so that you can increase your profit margins, but absolutely decrease the experience with the consumer, those type of things will actually lead to your company ending. If you don't shift with the times and if you don't provide a better experience, people will leave you alone. You can think about what happened to Panera. At one time, Panera Bread dominated the industry during the time where people wanted to go out for lunch and have quality food and ingredients, including breads, soups, whatever it was that Panera was offering. Panera also got bought out by private equity, and one of the first things that got cut was making something like fresh bread in the restaurant. While this may seem like not that big of a deal, when you're getting stale bread from a place called Panera Bread and what you came for originally was consistent quality leaves, guess what happens? Customers begin to leave too. Now you probably wouldn't set foot in a Panera Bread, although they do maintain some real estate in malls and other places that you've been, but they're not a thriving business and you can absolutely learn about them later. However, it's the concept that we're talking about. If you keep cheapening the experience with your customer will leave. So I've been preaching for a long time that we're in a consumer-centric economy. That means everything has to be about the consumer. The experience has to be about the consumer. The products that you have in store have to be about the consumer. You have to be using consumer feedback as well as utilizing the right data. And what instead are retailers doing? Nothing. When was the last time you went into a retailer, a luxury one at that, and had an amazing experience? I bet you can't think of one because some of these companies have in mind that they're going to operate the way they always have. When we set the tone and the standard, and our shoppers will understand. And to be honest, that would have been okay with physical retail if we didn't have the dawn of e-commerce and globalization. You see, when I was growing up, you had to go to the mall to shop or you had to look at catalogs. But online shopping was not as popular back then, so it wasn't really a viable channel in which to procure clothing. But now you can literally buy anything online. And while online still accounts for a smaller percentage of purchases than in store, people would rather go online than to take their gas, time, and expectations into a shitty retail experience. And this is important to note because this is causing a lot of problems. Shopping used to be about community. You were confident that you were going into a store that would have the things that you want. You would get an experience that made you feel good because that's a part of spending your money in some luxury experiences is theater. It's about feeling a certain way because at the end of the day, clothing is literally just cloth. So if it wasn't about experience, people could literally simply wear whatever it is that they wanted, sheets, anything, sackcloth, whatever, and keep going. But that is not what we're finding that people are doing. People like to peacock. People like to express themselves. People love quality. And they're also starting to notice the difference. And when it comes to voting with your dollar, imagine going in somewhere to spend your money and the entire experience is outdated and shitty. Well, we're not accounting for all of these things when we're thinking about what is happening to physical retail. Now, of course, when COVID came, we saw a surge of people kind of shopping online or spending discretionary income in a certain way. That was COVID, and COVID has been over. But what COVID did show us is that there is a desire to spend. When people have money, they will spend on nice things, and we saw that. We saw all of those little checks that people got, went to the Gucci store, and there were lines outside of them. And no shame. Again, aspirational shoppers are still one of the driving forces in the luxury industry and in shopping in general. But what we're not seeing is the experience that matches the desires of shoppers. So let's go back to what's happening economically. Right now, we're in a K economy. That means that the economy looks similar to the letter K. High-income consumers and true luxury clients are still spending their money. And value retailers are doing just fine. So highly discounted items are going to be doing just fine. However, the middle is collapsing. And when we think about physical retail, we're thinking about much of physical retail is also that middle piece that is now collapsing. Now, moving away from Saks, because we can bash them all day, but everyone that I know who spend money and purchase luxury did not buy from Saks in the last 10 years. That's even people in areas like in North Carolina where there's one Saks. You didn't even waste time going because you absolutely knew they wouldn't have the inventory that you wanted. Now, I've worked in department stores and I understand the gap that happens. There's not enough data being collected at all for buyers to even be informed. In places like in North Carolina, where it's the top 3 places to live every year, where you have people coming in from Silicon Valley, you have people coming in from New York, you have people with the income that would be necessary to shop, there's still a total lag in what you see in the stores. And that's because the response time and data collection that is needed in stores to stay relevant just doesn't exist. Now, why it doesn't exist? Because decision makers who don't understand the needs of the customers still make decisions for their bottom line without understanding how important it is to include customers when you're thinking about your bottom line. Now, to us, this may seem like a no-brainer. Customers need good experiences. Customers want the things that they want. Why on earth wouldn't you have a mechanism set up to simply collect that information, pass that information upstream, and make educated decisions based on the data that you've collected? Because this is the fashion and retail industry, and if it's one thing, it's ass backwards when it comes to integrating technology and understanding the needs of the consumer. What I'm going to tell you is that I see a massive death for the luxury retailers across the US, period. And because we have waited so long to see them deliver an experience that's worthy of spending money with them versus finding it cheaper somewhere else, versus just ordering it online, or versus just going into the actual brand store, having your moment on Instagram and getting treated hopefully good if it's not like the row. Because we haven't seen that, it's going to be rapid death for luxury retailers. Now, outside of it just being the shittiest experience ever, totally lacking in the innovation department, sales associates aren't even equipped to gather the necessary data. And it's not that this information hasn't been available for at least the last 10 years since I've gotten into the industry. It's just the mindset of these corporations where they are inflexible and unable to change and pivot or even understand how to measure innovation in a way that makes it scalable. And it's absolutely scary. I mean, if you talk to any sales associate, all they want is to be able to do their job better. How can they do their job better if they're not even equipped with the technology that's needed? What are we really asking them to do? Is to continue selling in an archaic manner? Yes. Yes. And these are supposed to be really smart people coming into these industries, getting these positions, being so important and unable to make any change whatsoever that creates a better experience for the customer. Why in the hell, in a consumer centric economy, would the customer be the last person on your mind or the least important thing in the food chain of fashion? Who has to wear the clothing? Who has to buy the clothing? Who has to buy into the theater of even experiencing your brand? But here's the thing. The whole reason why we preach about technology is because tech makes things easier. Even if you knew what customers were asking for, it would be better than shooting in the dark and not putting the right things on your shelves. But let's go past that because there's an even bigger issue here around trust. You see, if I were a brand and my products were high quality and I was after a luxury consumer, the last thing I would want to do is front my product to a retailer who can't even guarantee traffic in their stores so that my products can be seen. One, I wouldn't trust fronting a product to anybody at this point because if you paid attention, Saks can't pay any of their vendors. They owe Chanel alone $139 million. And if you're a Chanel, you can afford to maybe not collect on $139 million right now. But if you're a more niche luxury brand or you're just starting out or you don't have the Chanel funding machine behind you, then you're screwed. A lot of brands who are in DTC need absolutely to have a physical component to their business models because DTC alone isn't actually panning out to be the best option. Although right now it's looking like it's the only option. So let's understand what's going on with DTC. So way back in the day, and I've talked about this before, SEO was a really big deal so that your website could be discoverable on search engines. But if you didn't really pay attention, Google limited its searchability recently from the hundreds of pages that it used to be. If you type something in, you see hundreds of pages where you could search for it, and then you would see all these ads, and they limited it down to about 10 pages. This is a huge difference because if your product existed on page 12, if your product existed on page 98, your product doesn't exist anymore. Now, I did a video about how important it is for you to properly code your items on your online store so that it shows up in the agentic AI searches. And honestly, you should take time to look at that if you haven't thought about it. Because right now, about 50% of the searches for clothing is being done by bots. And no, it doesn't mean that robots are sitting there and searching clothes. It just means that people are using interfaces like ChatGPT, Perplexity, so on and so forth to find items. Because trying to search for anything is extremely difficult. So let's go back to how this actually hurts a brand. The idea of you going and fronting your product to a retailer in hopes that they can get the traffic into their stores is an absolute no-no. I would never do that if I were you. I would never recommend anybody do that. It is so dangerous because you're not going to get paid. Again, you don't have the same bag that Chanel might have to be owed so much money and just hope that everything, kind of goes over well in the court proceeding. You don't have time for that. However, you still need to have a physical retail model in order to balance out what you're missing with DTC. So even if you implement agentic AI, there's still people who are impulse buyers. They want to feel your products. I mean, fashion is a multi-sensory engagement, and discovery isn't necessarily happening in the digital space as much as we think. I read an article recently that said discovery is actually happening on the secondhand market. And if that's the case, that's absolutely scary because one, you have no way to trace that. And two, once an item is sold, you get no revenue whatsoever off the resale of that item. So once again, your products don't have enough data connected to it in order for you to feel comfortable with just putting them out there. So what are brands really going to do? Well, we're going to have to think about hybrid models for physical retail. Now, I've seen brands do pop-ups and I haven't really been impressed with them because while pop-ups are great temporarily, we still need a way to trace the data, get your products in front of the right consumers, get those consumers constantly excited about you. And if you just do one pop-up here, what about in another state? What about the demand in other areas? Where is the connectivity that's going to happen? Also, are companies even going to let you occupy their spaces for limited amounts of time? Well, maybe in the past they wouldn't, but I think there's a way to do it smarter now, perhaps in combinations with brands that are non-competitive. There has to be something so that people who are walking through these physical retail spaces can absolutely interact with your product. No, I wouldn't front your product. No, I wouldn't pay for the overhead if you don't have to. But yes, we need to start thinking about what those hybrid models look like because people are still shopping. People still want to spend their money, regardless of how much a person makes. If they're a luxury consumer, they are a luxury consumer. They need the luxury product put in front of their faces. So how do we meet in the middle? Well, there's a lot of technology that could help us to meet in the middle, but there has to be a changing of how we're thinking about retail and stop considering that customers don't matter whatsoever because they absolutely do. So when we go back to thinking about Saks and what went wrong, On paper, it was a luxury merger. On the balance sheet, it was a real estate trade with a department store problem attached. And that's simply what happened. Now, I do think we have to guard our industry if we want to continue to kind of bridge this gap between consumers and products, because now it is getting absolutely out of hand and it costs people their jobs and livelihoods and opportunities. There were people that survived off of working in department stores like Saks, and there were people that really enjoyed shopping, and now both of those people do not have the same connection, which sucks. And maybe this sounds like a small problem, but if you compound that problem and you scale it up, you could see how Saks becomes totally irrelevant, people experience more joblessness, and the entire idea of shopping is ruined and people are spoiled. This is also why people rather have things on discount, because we've definitely confused shoppers about where we put the value. Obviously, if you come in store and you're not finding the brands and the things that you want, you're going to leave. And God forbid you find it somewhere else cheaper simply because you waited and other companies are trying to lure you in. Now you've created a whole new habit that is not supported by our industry. Not to mention that some of the brands and items that Saks carry was absolutely not quality whatsoever. And when you claim to be quality and your prices are supposed to be luxury, and then the actual items that you're selling is trash, you're totally going to lose the trust of the consumers who held you up. I can't say this enough. I think if any retailer wants to survive, you have to integrate technology. Stop playing. Stop wasting everybody's time. Everyone keeps talking about these wonderful, innovative experiences in store. I haven't seen one innovative, wonderful experience yet. Stores don't know who you are when you walk in. They don't know what you've already purchased from them. They don't even know why you're here. They don't know what you're about to get. When you try things on, they don't know what came in the fitting room, what went out, what made it to the cash wrap, what went home. You don't give any user-generated content once you get home and try those things on. You don't give your opinion. Your reviews might come, might not. It's a totally disconnected experience that literally doesn't require robots in store in order to improve. And as someone in the fashion tech industry, I am growing so tired of trying to teach these people who could care less about our industry how important it is to treat customers with dignity, respect, by simply innovating in a way that makes them happy. It is embarrassing to see what is happening in fashion. If it's not strange amount of waste that pops up, we have issues around the experience being some of the worst experiences ever. And now what is going to happen for brands that want to survive this era and get their products out? All of the wonderful artists creating things that people absolutely want no longer have the safety of the wholesale model to uphold their businesses. This is a disaster, and you have to ask, what is taking executives so long to make the choice of updating this experience so that it meets the needs of the consumer? What is the problem? Now, perhaps they're not going to conferences or trade shows, so they don't understand. Perhaps they're too afraid to lose their jobs right now to kind of make any big changes. Then hire somebody from the outside to do this and test, learn, and repeat. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting these shitty, luxury, fake experiences. People who normally shopped here are going to absolutely keep going out of the US to where they can actually feel like they're having a luxury experience. And in the meantime, we suffer because people are not going to be getting the products that they want. So yes, Saks was a shitty example of exactly what goes on when private equity eats up an industry, but it's also an example of what's going on in the fashion and retail industry in general. We are begging for innovation. We are begging for new ways of thinking, begging for you to help new brands get in front of the right consumers, because we do want to shop. We do want fly things, nice things. We want to go back out and have experiences. But no, we may not want to be in a dingy fitting room. We may not want to see a sales associate who's so disgruntled. We may want you to know a little bit more about us so that when we're coming and we're looking for an item, we don't have to go on the back of a four-way and look for something that wasn't even presented and figure out where things are. Maybe we want things to come faster for us. There's so many ways to solve this problem. I literally am just asking you executives, you check writers, you decision makers that are so important to our industry, do something different. Wow us. Put the customer back into the center of the business. Stop letting companies and people that are not in our industry come in and make decisions that are detrimental for the consumers, and actually help us match people to product in a better way. Now, I don't know what else to say, but this is what we're asking for. And so that we can avoid any more disasters, just get it done. And I'm here to help you. Anyway, if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, Fashion Technology 101. There's also a version of that newsletter now on Substack, so you can absolutely subscribe there. We just released our free resource of conferences and trade shows for 2026. So if you are one of those executives and you're not even sure where to start, go ahead and download that trade show list and conference list. Head to one of those conferences and get in your head how you're going to do something different that's going to delight the customer. We also have a tech integration framework that is available on my website, luxuryandfinch.com. Now, that's for brands and retailers who absolutely want to do something exciting, integrate technology, and create an experience that actually wows the customer. There's so many ways to do that, and we created a framework so that you can walk your team through it successfully and pick something, test, learn, and repeat. And then finally, if you are a tech solution and you are begging to get in front of the right brand and retailer, you have to join our fashion technology directory, because we're going to be launching this in March with an interface that allows brands and retailers to talk in plain language to understand how they can be matched with your product. So absolutely go on luxuryandfinch.com, find all of these resources. And for more information like this, subscribe, like, share, and stay tuned. Thank you.